Hello, good day. How are we? I'm going to go with a little bit of a different kind of video this time. This is on the most recent balance patch for Jotunheim, uh, and it's quite a hefty one. I just thought I'd talk through some of the changes that have made to some of the classes um, since it's hit early access. So, coming into early access, there was a couple of changes made to the game from the demo that some people may have played. One of those was mainly a new class, uh, which was the Flame Sister, you can see at the top here, and another one was Odin, one of the gods you can choose when you level up. And they were quite underpowered, so they obviously hadn't had any demo feedback. They came straight into the early access, and yeah, so that you can see going through these notes, there's actually quite a few changes to them, which is really good. So there's a general change to the top here, which sort of seems more like a developer balancing inside the chance to reset a skill. Um, Essentially, it's just clarifying how it's being reset. Fine. So first up, then the Blazing Soul class trait, the burning duration reduced from 5 to 3. So this is quite good because I found in deep runs on Insane, on Muspelheim, on Flame Sister, uh, you're just not killing stuff fast enough. Like you've got the burn on them, or something like that, but you're just not able to kill mobs fast enough before they overwhelm you. So going down to 3 seconds is quite good because it's the same amount of damage, I assume, over the 3 seconds. This is actually something that I reported myself, so I'm quite happy to see is in here. Only a week to get it fixed. Where evasion, the class actually has a base 20% of chance to avoid all damage, and it wasn't stacking with anything else. So, for example, there's a trait you can pick from Loki, I believe it is. It might be Odin, where you get 10% evasion per point, so 20% total if you take both points. And there's also one of the weapons that you can choose. You can get 10% from there. So you can actually get 50% pretty easily without sort of much investment overall. There might be another few pieces of evasion actually from the subclasses and things like that that I'm missing. But 50% was very easily attainable, and it actually wasn't. It was bugged, so it was only showing 30%. So that's really good. Just a straight up, bug fix there. The Dance of Daggers projectiles now passing through enemies, I think, is actually going to be quite massive. Previously, as mentioned, Flame Sister was having issues with large numbers of mobs uh, on Insane, and you just couldn't kill things fast enough. Passing through enemies is great. Dance of Daggers has a pretty long range. You can get to sort of half the screen when it's pretty well leveled up. So passing through is just fantastic. And this is sort of leads into the next part. The two main 4 point. I mean, you can play a lot of different builds, but the two main that I was finding really well with was a shrapnel pot and a flaming ray upgrade, along with I don't think it's actually touched on in any changes here, but the decoys they're quite good. So shrapnel pot delay is now 1 second, which is really good because oftentimes your shrapnel pot would generate in a really good spot, but enemies would just move out of it. So you had to play a lot of a mini game of kiting them through these different circles. So 30% poison chance as well, and the cooldown is improved to 5. I believe it was 8, starting at 8 going down to 6. So again, really good. The evolve as well just has the changes, and it has even a further lower cooldown. So that's really good. This I'm actually surprised to see because I said Flaming Ray was doing really well, but the rotation speed is doubled, and the cripple, which was the movement speed slow, I think 30% perhaps, maybe 35%, is now 20% burn chance, and it has a cooldown reduction. So Flaming Ray is even stronger than before if you weren't relying on that cripple, which you shouldn't be usually. You just be killing things, and that's going to help a lot with that. Fire Dart is not something that I've made too many runs with, but it's looking like the damage is being reduced overall initially, but it's got more missiles, so less damage on bosses, but more damage on enemies. Which that was what was one of the issues with Flame System was just getting overwhelmed. So pretty welcome change. Explosion chance going down, but that cooldown has also gone down. So we'll have to see how that one goes out. I'm not exactly sure how it's going to play out. But the fire trail one again, so they're really tying flame sister into burning, which makes sense because that's sort of the shtick of the class there. A 35% burn chance is really good. It was 20% before, and it was just spots on the ground after you dashed. So you really had to sort of make sure you were dashing through enemies to get it. So the fact that it's now a burn effect, again, 3 seconds is good. Fiery Touch, which is another one of the class skills, changing to 35% Inferno damage, I believe, should be good. Incineration, again, this is the one that procs on your auto attacks, the burn effect um, with 3 seconds. I think this is really good, just like tying them all into these 3 second durations. You know, stuff's going to die after 3 seconds if it has enough burns on it. This, I think, is one of the big ones. So this was a 5% chance to slay, I believe. I might be wrong there, but 5%. But it's now not on hit, it's on critical hit. So that's a little bit different. Sort of brings a bit of crit scaling in. But you're getting a 5 HP heal with 20% chance on critical hit. So although that times down to 100% of the time, you can think of you getting 1 health per hit if you've got um, you have to sort of if you're critting often. So you usually can get to around 50% crit pretty comfortably with some if you're picking Loki for the increased crit and not Loki, Thor for the increased crit. So 20% chance on critical hit, you're hitting on average every 2 attacks. Every 20% chance on that is every 10 attacks, you're getting 5 HP. So it's about 0.5 HP every time you attack. But you got to think that Flame Sister attacks really fast, so that's a key part here. So we'll have to see how this goes. The 0.3 second cooldown is pretty good. I think that's actually a change that we'll talk about a little bit more. This is very similar to the Berserker's heal on crit or heal on hit actually, which is being changed a little bit further down. Iron Fan is the passive when you have evasion, reduced cooldown to 0.6 seconds. So it was 1 second before. And again, as I mentioned, this change where evasion was being bugged, a 0.6 second on 50% evasion, which is very easy to get now, means if you are getting hit by a lot of ranged attacks, that's the majority of the ones that do hit you eventually. You can usually build your movement speed up to dodge most melees, unless you have to dodge through them. You're going to be triggering this a lot. So if that is critting as well. See, this on Master Assassin, I don't know if this is attacks or spells. Sometimes when things trigger on spell critical hits, it can be much better, depending on the class you're on. So we'll have to see how this goes. Kindling, I can't exactly remember what this does, but removing cooldown sounds good. I can probably look that up, but that'll be for later on. And again, the Fire Cloak, which is one of the weapon skills. Don't believe this is the one that I usually ran. I owned the first weapon and the third weapon. First weapon gave evasion, and then the third weapon I think was collection range or something like that. So that'll be interesting. Again, another burn effect, sort of tying in. Berserker. So this was probably one of the 2 classes I had the most in both the demo and the first sort of little while of early access, the most success on. The other one being Revenant. Berserker I found really strong, especially with this ability, Axe Throw. So it's getting a bit of a nerf, which I think is completely well deserved because it was super strong. Its cooldown is reduced to 1.5. It's increased to 1.5 from 1 at the start, going down to 0.5. So going up to 0.75 from 0.5 seconds cooldown. You spit out axe throws all the time, especially with the trait that when you crit, removes the cooldown on a random skill, which is another Berserker class tree thing. You were just throwing axes all the time. Interestingly enough, it doesn't touch upon the evolve here. It actually just mentions the axe throw. So I don't know if the evolve has changed. Evolve was longer cooldown, 4 seconds I believe. You throw out a massive axe, which splits into smaller ones. So if that's not changed, I usually went for axe throw evolve. It was so much damage. And this spell really carried you through the game. If you were struggling a little bit, it had a really good range. Oh, it was random. Sometimes you could hit the ground. It was really good. So I think this is very well deserved, but should still be really strong. Expect it. So open wounds, fixed a bug where bleed wasn't applied, added crit damage. So this was believe just a stacking bleed. I think this was a skill you could pick on your skill shop, so you could actually choose to have this in. Now it's got critical damage onto it. It's a bit more appealing. Previously, I was taking it because I often found I was just running out of things on Berserker anyway to take. So it was decent. I wasn't really noticing it, especially end of the game when you see how much damage each thing's done. I didn't really remember. You actually don't see how much damage passives do at this stage. You only see how much skills do. So it was negligible, but if it wasn't applying bleed and it now is, that's good. Berserker does well with bleed. This is I probably think is the biggest change to Berserker. The next one, at least for my playstyle, how I was playing, I was sort of being quite fast and loose with Berserker. You had so much healing from in your sort of you could get up to 3 seconds if you took Thor's power. You got 3 seconds whenever you raged. You got pretty much in perma rage um, through the game, which was really good. Then you had 3 seconds from this troll sign. That healing power was then boosted by 50%. So you were looking like, I think when I worked it out, about 15 HP a second all the time. Not to mention whenever you crit, if you had the skill, you could get 5 HP with a little bit of a cooldown and things like that. So the way I played Berserker was just run in there, pretty fast and loose, just trying to put out as much damage as possible and play so that I could heal it up. If I noticed I was getting like a couple of hundred health, I would also stack health as well because it was a really good one. Stack health and take the Odin skill where your skills did more damage based on, or you did more damage based on the amount of health you had. So I could get down to comfortably around 900 health. I think you start with 600. I have to remember what you start without. So you were stacking a bit of health there and you were gaining about 30% damage, 36% maybe. So that was really good. So this going down to 35% is a pretty hefty change to the playstyle I played with, but it might open up some of the other ones. I think the other one was like more attack damage, doubled in rage. That's the other thing as well. This is doubled when you're enraged on Berserker, which again, you're all the time. So it's more like your healing power is reduced from 100% increase to 70%. So when you think about it that way, it's about a third off. Well, it's always a third off, but it's still going to be decent, I think. But it is a hit to that, so I have to see how it plays out. But I think Berserker will still be completely fine, which is really good. It was already very strong. So Essence Expansion passive, I have to check whether this is one on the tree or not. Added 15% damage to class skills. That's quite good. Most CRS most serious builds that I played relied on a lot of XP. You were leveling up really high, meaning you could have access to a lot of different ones. Similar to the Berserker, I would spec out a lot on the tree itself, from the skill shop, so that I could actually get access to everything. Obviously, you can only still have 2 abilities, so I normally went with the I have to try to remember now. There was a skull that's fired out and then wisps that fire in a concentric circle. None of those are changed, so I think that's fine. So class skills were a lot of your damage, so this is good. That is what to say is you generally went through everything of your class skills because your class skills were so good because you got so many points into them. Movement speed increased to 2% per enemy with a debuff from 1%. Certain number of the weapons do have a buff to debuffs, or they inflict them more often. I believe it's your first one, the sort of scythe spin around you. So going up to 2% is good. I felt slower on CRS definitely than Revenant and Berserker and Flame Sister, because it was the slowest class. It doesn't have any base movement speed you can think of. So this could be interesting to take. I usually took it if I didn't have anything else, to be honest. I didn't really notice that much movement speed, but it can be nice, especially on Muspelheim where you're having to dodge those mortar shots that occasionally spawn, or getting from one side of the map to the other. I have had maps time out on Flame System, on CRS, because I haven't been able to get to the Jotun in time, like once or twice, just so I'm not paying attention to the clock. Healing Ward added 25, 50, 75 maximum health. So Healing Ward would be, I'd have to check, but it would be when you gain wards, you heal. So that's actually quite nice, because I was never taking this, because depending on which subclass you took, and here's the one actually that I usually took, which was when you were on 0 wards, collecting XP crystals gave a chance to uh, replenish your ward, it can be quite good, but it relied you on being on 0 ward, when you could have it to 3. So this essentially would do nothing. Usually the healing would do nothing if you weren't getting hit or if you were trying to sort of play around that 0. Like oftentimes I would be sitting in a group of enemies because when ward popped, you gained, depending on how many talents you got in or skills, you could gain about 3 to 4 seconds of invincibility if you had it sort of maxed out. So I was playing, you're sitting on 0 wards, it procs, you get the 4 seconds of invincibility. By that time, you've killed everything around you, you've sucked in enough XP crystals to summon another ward, it pops, and it goes. You can essentially almost AFK. Especially is really good for not for those Nith Stangs, because you can't cast in there, so it's kind of terrible. But for any portal closings or things like that, it was really good. So they're actually making this sort of want to be taken by adding 75 maximum health. I think is quite good. Like it needed something. This is a good one though. Fixed bug with XP crystals not dealing damage when there were more than 0 wards. Again, this one sort of falls from the fact of because you can't see it doing damage at the end screen. It's hard to tell. It was only 5 damage, which has been increased to 8, so that's quite interesting. But it's hard to tell how much damage this actually does. Usually hard to tell unless you're sort of reviewing what you're doing or something like that. The big thing for me, which I always like on anything, is add 30% collection range. I think collection range is fantastic, especially on a class, especially on this one, where you're wanting to, as mentioned, sit on 0 ward, collect enough crystals to get up. This will help with that, and it now does more damage, so it's fantastic. And which subclass added 30% damage reduction? I'll have to play with this one as well, sort of similar to the wanting to play with other ones from Berserker now that this is a bit nerfed. But yeah, I would always take this one purely for that. I think that's not gonna change because of the 30% collection range buff. It's just so good. But 30% damage reduction is really good. Like you can't go past that one. I never really found myself dying with this sort of playstyle of just collecting them. It was often just running out of time on the map, as mentioned, which should be fixed by this one. But yeah, we'll see how that goes. That'd be interesting. Revenant again, probably it was definitely the first class that I cleared insane on both maps, followed by the Berserker. So it's been really good. Focus fire arrow count reduced to 16 from 20. Yeah, that's probably fair. It does mention as well that evolves is changing ever so slightly. So this would just when you evolved it, which I invariably went for, I found it really strong. Um, you were just constantly shooting out arrows. So this is, ever so slightly changed where you're getting, instead of 10 arrows a second, you're getting 8 roughly. Yeah, so it's about 20% change. Again, same here, 20% change. So yeah, it's fair. I think it's still really strong. Especially good on, because it's just shooting out in a steady stream, it's really good on bosses. Revenant had probably one of the biggest buffs for Revenant, and it's actually not here, is its volley ability, which you didn't always get. You had to roll a few times to get it, but you shoot 3 arrows by baseline as Revenant. I think you shoot 3 arrows for 100% damage roughly. You can add 2 arrows and then 2 more arrows, and you deal less damage. So you're adding 5, you're dealing 20% less or 40% less, something like that, and you're adding up to a total of 7 arrows, but you're doing 70% less damage. You think that's bad, but for the case that those arrows shotgun, meaning you stand next to a boss, you hit him with 7 arrows, they're doing 40% damage each, for example. That's 280% damage, which is better than 3 arrows at 70% or whatever. 7 arrows at 70%. I'm not sure of the actual numbers exactly, rather than it just does more. You'll see this if you take an attack damage build, which I often built, which is attack damage and focus fire. You're clearing whole screens with your 7 arrows anyway. You have a particularly hard lord or something you stand next to, you blow it up in a second. It is actually I'm surprised it wasn't changed in these notes, but it's still early. For Nithstangs, it's insane. You dash inside the Nithstang when there's not enough enemies around. You stand next to the pole, often one shot. You just kill the Nithstang, and that it turns off all your spells ordinarily. Doesn't turn off your auto attack though, and yeah, that's fantastic. So I think this change is fine, but your single target was already covered by taking that volley upgrade, so that's interesting. For your grappling web, just the evolve actually, which is interesting. The damage is increased to 15% from 12. That's good. I didn't often take grappling web. I took it once and found it fine. I did find myself taking the second one here, skull shot, a lot, which I'm surprised it's actually buffed. So this is a secondary, so it shoots out a skull at max level, the evolve, and then explodes out. So it's going to increase your clear. So I think that's really good. The two that I would normally take, actually, trying to think of now, would be Skull Shot and Focus Fire. So this might be a play, especially if they add a new map or something like that with a little bit more need for lockdown. Would be the Grappling Web. Yeah, be interesting. So the damage has gone up on this one, but the damage has also gone up on this one. So I can't see myself going off Skull Shot. Skull Shot was really good, especially to pick up little mobs uh, that you may have missed from your main shot. Apparition passive damage increased to 12 from 10, free shot increased to 25%. This one as well, because this is a percent chance per arrow, is again so fantastic with volley. So 25% chance, if you max out volley, which I believe you should. I haven't seen anything to change that. It's fantastic. You're actually you actually are over 100% chance to freeze. If you're 25% chance, 7 arrows, bang. And it works on everything aside from the Jotun itself, which that's probably one of the easiest fights purely because there's not that many other mobs around. I found that the other ones, if you're fighting those not they're not lords, but they're essentially lords, lieutenants, or maybe in the freeze or the fire. They can be tough, but having freeze on those works. Having freeze on regular things is fantastic. This being buffed, I'm actually very surprised. This was really good. This plus the knockback from Thor. It is Thor. Yeah, Thor, the blue god, like solves all of your, you could call them crowd control or something on Revenant, because you're hitting stuff from such far away, you're knocking it back, you're freezing it, it can't get to you. So I'm very surprised it was buffed, but yeah, that's fantastic. This is probably, now this I have to check exactly what chance this is to release ethereal arrows. I believe this is the dodge, the jump. If it's not, I found ethereal pronunciation, to be very underwhelming. So if anyone doesn't know, um, this is when you attack. Ordinarily, your arrows have a chance to turn ethereal and go through, and essentially just keep going through the mob once they hit something. Um, but even stacking all of the different sources of ethereal arrow, I was looking at like a 10% chance per hit, or when I dodged, it was a 20% chance, or there was nothing on crit or anything like this with like, no high marks. So this being going to 100%, I believe this is the dodge one. I might be wrong, but anything for ethereal arrows increasing to 100%, I believe is needed. I did not find it useful at all, especially when it was either this one or another one it would just lower your chance to hit with ethereal arrows, and you wouldn't care because you weren't hitting with them anyway. They were just happening ever so often, and you weren't really caring about them. So this being 100% is fantastic, and they buffed one of the other subclasses. So the subclasses of Revenant actually I found probably the most choice in. So there's one that buffs your wolf summons. So you don't do more damage when you have wolves out, but you lower the cooldown of them going out, and they deal more damage. There was one that increases your attack speed while standing still, which I believe is this one. And then there's one where you heal when you dodge and just over time. I found I took the heal one and the wolf one and the marksman one. I tried them all out, and they were all pretty good. None of them were sort of outstanding as the troll scion, for example, for the berserker, or soul collector for the CRS. So that's interesting, and one of them being buffed to damage to class skills. As again, for Revenant, it's probably less important as the CRS.